This week, a very important lesson was reinforced in my mind and in my life. The Bible says, give thanks in all things. And this week, the last couple of days, I've had an opportunity to figure that out once again, even though in the midst of the issues that I went through, I'm sure my blood pressure went up, and I know for a fact my blood sugar did. My wife and I and son and dog decided that we would come to Missouri for Thanksgiving. We jumped in the car, and as we drove, a series of things occurred on the trip that I could look at as really, really horrible things. And at the time, they seemed very frustrating to me. But looking back over them, I saw how thankful I should have been to God all along the way and trusted Him all along the way. The first part of our trip, we get in traffic for over an hour, only to find out that when we got to the place where the traffic stopped backing up, there was a motorcycle that was burned to a crisp, a car that was burned to a crisp, 5 or 6 vehicles. And as I was reflecting on that, I thought how fortunate I was only to be delayed for an hour in traffic when there were families that were disrupted, lives that perhaps were taken. And God allowed me that day to not be in an accident like that, and to be thankful as I began to pray for the families, and my wife began to pray for the families that were involved in that terrible, terrible accident. We continued to drive, and as day turned into night, I noticed that the headlights on my vehicle started to flicker. They would go dim, and then they would come back, and they would dim again, and then they would come back, and I started looking at the gauges on my automobile, and I could tell that there was an alternator or a battery issue that was going to be a real problem for us. Now the weather was getting cold, and we really didn't know what we were going to do, and I thought maybe it was just battery cables, so I stopped and tried to clean the battery cables, and that did very little to assist the situation. But then I'm driving along, and all of a sudden it got worse and worse and worse, and to the point where the lights went out on the car, and I was just trying to figure out where I was going to pull off the side of the road, and just when the car began to completely die, when the battery went completely gone, when I had very little steering left, if any steering left, my brakes weren't working anymore, I found a turnoff where we could safely park in a parking lot of a closed business, and then we could call AAA. It was getting late, and it was pretty late already, and so we called AAA, and we're able to get hold of an individual, and they said that it would be 90 minutes for the person to show up. Fortunately for us, it was about 20 minutes when he showed up, and the guy that showed up was extremely kind, extremely compassionate, and he did everything he could do to get us started, but realized that really the fact was that our alternator was gone, and just starting the car wasn't going to get us a whole lot. So he charged the battery as fully as he could charge it, and he said, look, this is what I'm going to do. Because I asked him, are there any hotels? And he said, well, there's a Super 8 down the road. Now, Super 8s sometimes are good, sometimes not so good. And but today, he says, I'm going to follow you until you get there. So he followed us, and the car stalled again about 5 miles down the road, and sure enough, I was able to get it off into a grocery store parking lot that was closed, and he pulled beside us and charged us again, and that charge got us right to the front door of the to the hotel, and it died again. But he was with us still, and he charged us to get to the door of our room that we got. And the good news there was, in this hotel there was still rooms left, and there was actually one room that would take a dog. So, once again, a positive thing turned out of what could have been very much seen a negative thing. And while he was talking to us, he went on to share with us that it would be very unwise for us to use a particular place to get our car fixed the next day. So the next day, we waited, and finally we got our car towed to a mechanic who just so happened he had some time to fit us in. And when we got towed there, he charged us next to nothing to put in the alternator. Now we had to pay the full price for the alternator, and he made it a priority. And so we broke down at the right place apparently and called the right person, and then I drove the car back to pick up my wife and son and dog and to take off. And just as we were ready to get in the car to take off again, there was a housekeeper who was on the sidewalk, and the housekeeper said, "What's that hanging from the bottom of your car?" So I looked at the bottom of the car, and there was this piece of rubber that was following down, and it looked like it was part of the serpentine belt. So I opened up the car, and not only was that part of the serpentine belt coming off, but another piece of the serpentine belt was coming off. And I called the place that had just fixed the car and said, "Hey, look, this is what's happening." He said, "Bring it back." So we brought it back, and he said, "Look, I'll change the serpentine belt at no charge to you except for the cost of the serpentine belt, no labor, and we'll get you on your way." And within 25 minutes, he did that. I could have been on the side of the road once again with that serpentine belt broken, and us going no place and having to have another tow. And I just, I look at all of these things, and eventually we got on the road again. Now, the only thing it cost us was a hotel bill, and the hotel, I should say to you, the Super 8 there in a big cabin, it was clean and nice, and everybody treated us well. When we couldn't get out of the room by 11 in the morning, they let us stay, my wife and son stay in the room until I got back. Everything that could have gone wrong and did go wrong went wrong exactly the right place at the right time with the right people, that a little bit of money and a little bit of time fixed. The only thing that was sad about the whole thing was that we lost a little time with our grandkids and our daughter and son-in-law. But we made up for that because my granddaughter really wanted donuts, and so after we went out to eat last night, we went to Dunkin' Donuts, and we got her the pink donuts that she really, really wanted, and my grandson got his chocolate donuts as well as pink donuts as well as red donuts, and they're going to probably be so full of sugar today that we'll have just a whole nother level of excitement going on here. So here's what I'm going to try to say to you by taking all of this time with you, if you took the time to listen to all of this. Give thanks in all things, even when the things look bad, because the fact of the matter is, God is there, and He can take the worst of things, and He can make good come out of them. I wish I had remembered that throughout all of this time, so that I would not have been as frustrated as I was. But the fact of the matter is, God is worthy to be thanked, and I sit here at my daughter's house in her basement, in warm basement, after a wonderful couple days of experiencing the goodness of God and being thankful for Him. So today, my prayer is that in all things I will give thanks, and you will as well. Have a great Thanksgiving.